Welcome to another episode of Inspired Content doing tabletop games. This one is partly inspired by the fact that we're here in December and they just released a new movie that everybody's talking about. I found this a while back. This is the Death Star Assault game, and I'm kind of curious to see how the play goes. I can't say as I have a whole lot of expectations on it, but I'll set it up, give it a playthrough, and then give my thoughts and ideas it inspires, and see you on the other side. Okay, this is what play looks like for the player's perspective. This is your X-Wing. This is a torpedo. You can put them into these 3 slots. You can get as many as 5 at certain points in the game, but I have noticed that when you put them in the little divots to hold them, if you have 2 of them adjacent, you will not be able to get your base around one of them without knocking the other one out of space. So, one at a time, and what you're aiming for when you're in the first part of the match here is knocking some of these guys over, either onto their back or off into the lower trench. So there's a little drop off there. If you can knock them off, then you can take them off the board and you're awarded these. You can collect a certain number of them, sort of like a ticker. You mark your successes on the side of your ship or whatever. Once you get down to the docking bay, play consists of trying to hit Darth Vader. And so let's put a couple of the TIE fighters in here. Slide up on that. And there we go. So that would count here as 1 token for knocking that one down. And you can see down here it knocked down one of those trap doors. And so it helps clear some of that way. The youngest player goes first. Spin the spinner. Tells you how to move. Moving forward, 4 spaces would put you on a TIE fighter spot. Put a TIE fighter in there and fire a torpedo. That counts as a victory over that one. The player who plays that one gets a tile. Those tiles become important later on. When you get to the docking bay, you can turn them in for torpedoes. And then, spin again, get something like adding a TIE fighter, and then fire another torpedo. Okay, when it knocks down one of those doors, you leave it down. Okay, next spin would be a 2. 2 gets you into a blue space, which doesn't have a TIE fighter on it, so it doesn't do anything. You just move forward along the track. Okay, to the front. If we had our figures out here like this, to the front, if Han was getting a to the front, he would go in front of everybody. And, you know, depending on where he lands, might have to add a TIE fighter. Okay, 2. If we have somebody who's, say Chewbacca's moving 2 and he has to move forward 2 spaces, but Luke's in the way, Chewbacca moves to the very next space, which is a TIE fighter. He adds and he fires. And because he tapped it but he didn't knock it over or knock it into the lower arena, then it doesn't count as a victory over it, so that doesn't do anybody any good. Fire a torpedo, which is just fire a torpedo, but there's another spot here, which is Vader. And when Vader turns up, Vader's TIE fighter moves forward 1 space. So it's possible for Vader to win. Okay. The next thing to keep in mind is, you'll notice there are 5s around the bottom here. Those 5s are for once you've gotten into the docking bay. And so when you roll a Vader or a to the front or fire one torpedo or add TIE fighter when that player's in docking bay, they don't count as those things, they count as 5s. And then another piece of information that's useful is if you've got all 5 of your TIE fighters in the front arena and you get another add a TIE fighter while you're still out on the play field here, then you turn one of these up because you can't add them up here. Alright, and then, so let's pretend we've got everybody over here, or the first person to get down into the docking bay gets Princess Leia out from in front of Vader, and then everybody who goes into docking bay does a spin, and now you're looking at the numbers 2, 3, 4, and all the 5s, and whatever you spin on that, that's how many TIE Fighter Defender trapdoors you put up. And those are the ones defending Vader. And then, your very first round in, you get 1 torpedo automatically for being in the docking bay. And then you can use your tiles to buy additional ones. And that's how many shots you get. You cannot get more than 5. If you have 5 tiles and you get that 1 torpedo, save that extra tile to buy a second torpedo the second round you're in docking bay if you don't succeed. No, Vader can't advance once everybody's in the docking bay. That's what Vader looks like when he goes. Stand corrected. There's some things in here that didn't make much sense, but it sounds like they're saying only when you get to the docking bay do you spin for the number of TIE Fighter Defenders that go up down here on the trap doors. Only once. Every time after that you just get a torpedo and you shoot, which makes a lot more sense because otherwise these just keep popping up over and over again. Meanwhile, people still going along the track still spin for the numbers they get. But it also states the game may be won by a player who is still on the Rebel Journey track, which I still don't understand. So once one person gets to the docking bay, it's possible for any other player to get Darth Vader because he can't then escape. You can't, well, no. Because they're still spinning on the inner circle, so Vader can still advance his TIE Fighter. It doesn't say you specifically have to hit his trigger to do it, which is tricky because a simple bump anywhere on the board sets that thing flying, so I don't know. Alright, Star Wars Death Star Assault game. Well, I'm gonna be honest, this was better than I expected. It's not saying much. The overall rating I think I'd give this is maybe a 4.3 out of a 7.2. I mean, it's got some mechanics that make it better than just you're shooting marbles at a thing trying to knock it over, which is kind of what I thought it was going to be. But I mean, it seems like it's got a fair number of issues. But it does offer some potential, both for ideas that can be used for making maybe a better game like this, or making a game that a different theme but uses some of these other mechanic ideas that I'm talking about. So we'll move into those with, I mean, right off the bat, we've seen the movies. This game needs a Millennium Falcon mechanic. I'm going to call it that because it's some way for other players to back each other up for their attack run. I mean, it's happened in the movie. It needs to be done in some way in here, I should think. Some way to... I'm thinking the best way I can think to do that maybe would be to have the X-Wing be one type of player and the Millennium Falcon be a second type of player, and instead of shooting into TIE fighters, have really sort of be more like the X-Wing be more like trying to bank shots in a small pool setup, or something like that, and the Millennium Falcon facing in the other direction, having to do some kind of dogfight to attack TIE fighters and clear the space for them. If the Millennium Falcon fails in his job, that means that the TIE fighters in the next round can take out the X-Wing. When they made this game, it seemed like they were shooting for a mashup of the Princess Rescue and the destruction of the Death Star, which they're not the same scene. They don't need to be slapped together like that. It seems kind of unfortunate that they did it that way. Make it 2 games. Like the, if you want to do attack run on the Death Star, I think something like a skee-ball kind of game would work for that. And if you want to do a Rescue the Princess, something that's a little more capture the flag kind of would work better. I want to see a Death Star defense game. You know, it's like, I want to defend the Death Star against those rebel scum. But yeah, like I mean, since it's a Death Star, there's no reason you can't do a circular board and then have sort of paths that the fighters advance on towards vulnerable points, and you have to do whatever you need to do to pick them off to defend the Death Star. Okay, you really need to introduce a mechanic that's a risk for being shot down. There's nothing like that in here. There's no risk to the player. It's just play until whoever can knocks the Darth Vader out. The biggest risk there is that Darth Vader's TIE fighter can make it to the end and Darth Vader wins, but it's not, it's like everybody loses or nobody loses. And I like the idea of being able to have some kind of mechanic where you're shot down and then you have to go back to the beginning and maybe be Jet Porkins or Wedge Antilles or something, but some means to have a risk other than it just took you longer to get there and somebody else beat you to the victory. I mean, if we're not going to be movie accurate, there is just absolutely no reason why we can't have a play option where the princess is in a fighter and she's trying to rescue the Jedi in training. You know, and make the princess a playable character. Make something viable there. I think there should be some kind of card play option rather than a spinner, so that you can, like the point values of your cards, you can be stingy with them so that you don't advance as quickly, but you also have more options when it comes time to fire a weapon. So I might choose to keep more high value cards in my hand because they give me more shots to try to sink the Death Star than somebody who might play to get there first. They play their bigger numbers first to travel faster towards the attack location. Well, those are some of the ideas I came up for this game, or games with similar mechanics but a different theme. You don't have to use any of the stuff that I used in this for a Star Wars themed game. It'd be just as viable to do it another way. And that's it for this episode. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.